So just to be clear, the Warren Commission is saying that this man, N.J. Daniels, said that 3 or 4 minutes before the shooting, a man walked down the ramp in full view of both himself and Roy Vaughn, unquestioned, unstopped. Hello, you guys. Welcome back to my channel. And if you're new, then welcome. I am Jess Cannell, and I hope to earn your subscription today. Well, what I had planned to do for this video was the next installment of the Kennedy Men, but I hope you will indulge me. We have had a crazy few weeks, but also part of the reason for the change in today's plan is because a man named Rick reached out and asked, he said he's ready to downsize his JFK research collection. And he mailed me 3 boxes of books, including some real gems. He noticed in a video that I had mentioned that I only had Forgive My Grief 1 and 2. And so he sent me Forgive My Grief 3 right here on the front. This is a photo of one of the bullets that was noted and picked up on the day of the assassination. On the back, we have a photo of Parkland Hospital that is Seth Cantor said that this person right here is Jack Ruby. And Jack Ruby is one of those people that the more that you follow his movements that day, the more you realize he was here, there, and everywhere on the day of the assassination. So anyway, fascinating book there. He also sent me a book that I would not have been able to get for many, many years, David Lifton's Best Evidence, which I've wanted. Many of you have recommended. I haven't because on eBay it is quite expensive. And so it's one of those that I was like, well, maybe one day. Except now, thanks to Rick, I have a copy. But today what we're going to do, in lieu of the Kennedy Men, which is a good trade. We are getting down to the end of this book and I'm excited to finish it with you guys. But today's reading will be great. Oh, I also wanted to say this particular copy of Rush to Judgment that he sent me is a signed copy. So I have an autographed copy of Mark Lane's Rush to Judgment, which of course was an early critique of the Warren Commission, point by point. And something I've learned as I've been reading from Mark Lane, I didn't realize that he had a connection to the Kennedy brothers, that he had run for office and had connected with them politically. And so then when the assassination happened, he had a vested interest and he kind of was like, it kind of stuck in his craw. It was sort of like, why aren't other people as interested as I am in justice? Like, let's just make sure that we have justice here. And so that's what drove him to write this book and to continue his investigations over the years. But I thought that we would read a little selection. I was just browsing through and thinking, what could we read that would bring something new to you guys and to my knowledge? And the minute I saw this headline, I knew it was the one we had to read because this particular part of the story actually has a slight connection in my life as well. So I will just explain it very quickly so that I don't have to interrupt the story later. Basically, when I was growing up, my mom was on the Kiwanis Club in our local town, and I was going on a trip, so I went to the Kiwanis Club and I asked, would any of them want to support the trip? Many of them did, but one of the ones who did was Chief Roy Vaughn, and he was on the Kiwanis Club with my mom. He was the police chief in my hometown of Midlothian, Texas, when I was a child. And so I sat and talked with him a handful of times. Very kind man, very jovial and fun to be around. My mom got a kick out of him. He was, a wry old man by that point. But he appears in this story, and this is one of the other parts of the Kennedy assassination that I have a slight personal connection to. And so the minute I saw this title, I wanted to share this portion of the book with you. It's called Chapter 17, How Ruby Got into the Basement. So of course this is about Jack Ruby heading down to the basement of the Dallas Police Department on the day that, of course, he then reached out and shot Lee Harvey Oswald. So let's go ahead and read it. Here is an interview recorded by WFAA, which is a local TV station, on the 24th, so 2 days after JFK was assassinated. Question: Captain, what excuse letting him, Ruby, get that close? What excuse did he use? No, what excuse do you all have, that he got that close? I don't have an excuse. So that's from a reporter to Fritz. The commission presented its findings with finality when it posthumously convicted Lee Harvey Oswald of the murders of President Kennedy and Officer Tippit, no matter how much conflicting evidence there was. But it was unable to determine how Jack Ruby entered the well-guarded basement of the Police and Courts building on November 24th. The commission, every time it says commission, of course, it's talking about the Warren Commission. The commission reached unequivocal conclusions in matters which must remain reasonably doubtful to this day. But in a matter most susceptible to proof, how Ruby got in, it represented the evidence as not conclusive. So his point is lots of things that are still not decided, they took a firm stance on. But this was one of the few things that they're like, we have no clue. It's not conclusive how he got in. When Oswald was shot, there were 40 to 50 newsmen and cameramen in the basement, some of whom knew Jack Ruby, and 70 to 75 police officers, many of whom also knew him. That some versus many is a little bit funny. It's like a jab at the police department. The commission thought it, quote, appropriate to consider whether there is evidence that Jack Ruby received assistance from Dallas policemen or others in gaining access to the basement on the morning of November 24th. An affirmative answer would require that the evidence be evaluated for possible connection with the assassination itself, end quote. If it is true, as the commission claimed, that the, quote, Dallas officials, particularly those from the police department, have fully complied with all requests made by the commission, end quote, then the commission should have been able to find a conclusive answer to its question. But it was willing to do no more than speculate about what occurred and could only conclude that Ruby probably walked down the ramp leading from Main Street into the basement. The asterisk down below mentions Chief Vaughn, who I knew as Chief Vaughn. At this point, he was just a police officer. It says, probably must be a concession to the testimony of Roy E. Vaughn, the sole patrolman on guard at the ramp, who assured the commission that Ruby, to whom he referred as Jack, did not pass. If every officer on guard that day told the commission the truth, then Ruby never got into the basement at all. If the commission had been able to fix with certainty just where Ruby entered the basement, it would also have been able to learn the identity of the officer or officers responsible. Until the commission determined just where and how Ruby entered, the possibility that Ruby had help from the Dallas police could not legitimately be excluded. Nevertheless, the report stated, after considering all the evidence, the commission has concluded that Ruby entered the basement unaided, probably via the Main Street ramp, and no more than 3 minutes before the shooting of Oswald. So that was what the report decided. After considering all the evidence, they concluded he entered the basement unaided, probably via the ramp, no more than 3 minutes before the shooting of Oswald. Now, of course, there's the issue of him having sent a money order a matter of minutes before the shooting. So there is a definite beginning point to when he could have been in the basement. Notwithstanding its inability to establish where or how Ruby gained entrance, the commission concluded that he was unaided and alone. It considered, only to dismiss, the possibility that assistance to Ruby on November 24th might implicate the Dallas police in the assassination of President Kennedy. The report stated, quote, the Dallas Police Department, concerned at the failure of its security measures, conducted an extensive investigation that revealed no information indicating complicity between any police officer and Jack Ruby. The commission's conclusions were essentially a restatement of the finding of the Dallas police, who wrote less than a month after Oswald's death, we are convinced that our investigation has established to a reasonable certainty that Jack Leon Ruby entered the basement from the Main Street ramp, and that no collusion existed between him and any police officer or member of the press. Remember that there were press people and, of course, the police officers there in the basement. It was quite a crowd. And there is a place where Oswald is coming out from the back, but Jack Ruby is way back here. And my understanding of it, the place where the stairwell would have come out was not far from where Jack Ruby stepped out of the line. And so there's the potential that actually the way that Jack Ruby would have gotten in was to be aided, as opposed to what the Warren Commission says, that perhaps someone just let him in the door and he came down the stairwell and then steps out right where he was in line, rather than coming down the basement and making his way around to where he was in kind of the lineup of people. So that's one of the options. There's other options, of course, as well. But because of the time frame, you can't have him meandering the building for 30 minutes beforehand. It has to be a relatively quick assistance that was given in some way, whether it was someone literally opening the door for him or just leaving it open, whether or not he found a door open, or this ramp. The facts do indicate that Ruby entered the basement by the Main Street ramp. But before we can agree with the commission that Ruby entered unaided, we must ignore or else misrepresent the testimony of a former Dallas policeman named Napoleon J. Daniels. The commission did the latter. So he's saying they misrepresented the testimony of this man, Napoleon J. Daniels. This is the paragraph where he says they disposed of Daniels in one paragraph. Here is what was written in the commission. One other witness has testified regarding the purported movements of a man on the Main Street ramp, but his testimony merits little credence. A former police officer, N.J. Daniels, who was standing at the top of the ramp with the single patrolman guarding this entrance, R.E. Vaughn, testified that 3 or 4 minutes, before the shooting, a man walked down the Main Street ramp in full view of Vaughn, but was not stopped or questioned by the officer. So just to be clear, the Warren Commission is saying that this man, N.J. Daniels, said that 3 or 4 minutes before the shooting, a man walked down the ramp in full view of both himself and Roy Vaughn, unquestioned, unstopped. It continues. Daniels did not identify the man as Ruby. Moreover, he gave a description which differed in important respects from Ruby's appearance on November 24th, and he has testified that he doesn't think the man was Ruby. On November 24th, Vaughn telephoned Daniels to ask him if he had seen anybody walk past him on the morning of the 24th and was told that he had not. It was not until November 29th that Daniels came forward with the statement that he had seen a man enter. So that is what the Warren Commission is asserting. Here is what Mark Lane has to say about that. He says, a reading of the testimony and statements upon which this judgment was based compels the conclusion that Daniels, not the commission, deserves to be believed. Although a contrary impression is given by the paragraph quoted above, Daniels made 3 formal statements prior to his appearance before the commission. On November 29th, he signed an affidavit for the Dallas police. On December 4th, he made a statement to agents of the FBI. And on December 18th, he made a second statement to the FBI. So within a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, he's made 3 formal statements prior to appearing before the Warren Commission. While the commission was correct in stating that Daniels did not identify the man as Ruby, the whole truth is that he stopped just short of making so positive an identification. In his affidavit, signed 5 days after Ruby killed Oswald, Daniels deposed as follows. So this is Daniels' deposition 5 days after Ruby killed Oswald. It says this: several minutes later, I stepped out towards the street so that I could have a better view down the ramp. As I did so, I noticed a white male, approximately 50 years of age, 5'10", weighing about 155 to 160, wearing a dark blue or brown single-breasted suit, white shirt, and dark-colored tie. This man was not wearing a hat. He had light-colored hair, thinning on top, round face, kind of small head, fair complexion. He was not wearing an overcoat, nor was he carrying one, but he did have his right hand inside of his right suit coat pocket, approaching the ramp from the direction of the Western Union. We will remember that that is where Jack Ruby was said to have just come from. This person walked in the ramp and into the basement, going between Officer Vaughn and the east side of the building. Officer Vaughn at this time was standing at the top of the ramp in the middle of it, facing toward Main. I did not see Officer Vaughn challenge this person, nor did he show any signs of recognizing him, nor even being aware that he was passing, but I know that he saw him. It struck me odd at the time that Officer Vaughn did not say something to the man. On December 4th, agents of the FBI showed photographs of Ruby to Daniels, who advised them, according to their report, that the facial features of the individual in the photograph were similar to the man who walked by him and Officer Vaughn. The agents also reported that Daniels distinctly recalled that this individual's right hand was in his right hand suit coat pocket. And his first impulse was that the man apparently had something in his hand which caused the pocket to bulge more than it normally would. Remember, the man who is giving us this account, N.J. Daniels, was a former police officer, so he has an eye that's attuned to this sort of detail. His instinct told him at the time that the man was probably carrying a gun, but in view of the fact that Officer Vaughn allowed him to enter, he did not give it serious thought. This individual had an intent look on his face and was walking fairly fast. He, Daniels, also seemed to recall that he had seen this man at the police department during the time he was a police officer, as his face was vaguely familiar, and he also seemed to recall that he was partly bald. The FBI report further reveals that Daniels also stated that the photo of Jack Ruby that it was exhibited to him bore a likeness in his mind to the individual he had previously seen at the police department, as well as the individual who walked by him at the Main Street ramp. Daniels told the FBI that, quote, the time that elapsed from when the man walked down the ramp until the time he heard the shot would have been, in his mind, just enough time for that individual to enter the basement and get in position to shoot Oswald. As soon as Daniels heard the shot, he immediately looked down the ramp and saw police officers struggling with someone, but all he was able to observe of the individual was his right arm, which was extended, and he felt certain that the color of the suit on the arm was the same as that worn by the man who walked down the ramp. So he is just short of saying, the man I saw was the man who did the shooting, and it looks very much like Ruby. He's not outright putting all those things together, but you can see from the statements that is certainly the implication. Why wouldn't the Warren Commission want that to be known? Are they guarding the Dallas Police Department? Are they guarding Roy Vaughn? I don't know. When I interviewed Daniels on April 6th, 1966, at his real estate office in Dallas, he told me that the man who walked past Vaughn was the only person to enter the basement in the 20 minutes preceding the shooting of Oswald. This is a quote of a conversation between Daniels and Lane. Daniels is the first to speak. If Ruby did go in the Main Street ramp between 11 and 11:20 that morning, then he is the man I saw enter. He was the only one to go in there. Vaughn was standing right in the middle of the entrance to the basement. His responsibility was to let no one enter. Lane: do you know why Vaughn let Ruby enter the basement? No, I don't, except that he knew who he was. He had to know who he was. He looked at him in his direction. If Daniels did not see Ruby, he certainly saw someone resembling Ruby, who apparently was carrying a pistol in his pocket and who entered the basement just before Oswald was shot. The commission was evidently pleased to such a degree by its ability to report that Daniels did not identify the man as Ruby as to be otherwise indifferent to the man's identity. The commission yeah, right. If it wasn't Ruby, then who was it, right? If you say, well, he didn't identify him as Ruby, well, who else was there? Did you show him other lineups? Is there other possibilities of who entered the basement when Roy Vaughn was supposed to let nobody enter the basement? The commission also asserted that Daniels, quote, doesn't think the man was Ruby. It is true that when questioned by counsel on April 16, 1964, Daniels stated that he saw a guy go in the basement, but I don't think it was Ruby. However, when confronted with his original statements to the police, which indicated that the man was Jack Ruby, Daniels swore that they were accurate. What is that? Is that mistaken memory? Is that him changing his view? Is that he's been worked on and so now he's not willing to say it was Ruby, but in the beginning he was? I don't know what to make of that, but Mark Lane is laying it out for us to consider. He was then invited by commission counsel to alter his earlier statements. The question was, are you quite sure it refreshes your memory, or are you worried about contradicting yourself? No, I'm not worried about contradicting myself. I'm just trying to be sure and tell the truth. Right. I want to assure you that it doesn't matter to us whether you contradict yourself or not. Right. There is no suggestion made to you here that if you made a mistake before, that any kind of penalty or punishment or prosecution will follow, because that isn't so, unless you made a willful misstatement. But I'm not going into that now. What I want to know is what really happened. Now, Mr. Daniels, that's why I asked you before, to try to put everything out of your mind. With the best will in the world, Daniels could not put it out of his mind that he saw a man who looked like Jack Ruby walk past the officer on guard carrying what Daniels believed to be a pistol and enter the basement. 5 times the lawyer asked Daniels if he were sure that his original statements were correct. 5 times, Daniels affirmed that he was. So the earlier statements that he affirms are the ones that indicate someone who looked like Jack Ruby walked right down the ramp. During my conversation with Daniels, he indicated that he believed the man he saw was Ruby. He said, "The first impression I got when Oswald was shot was that the guy I saw go down there did it." Now that, this is Lane asking, now that you have seen pictures of Jack Ruby, does that strengthen or weaken your original impression that the man who walked past Vaughn was Ruby? Daniels' answer was, "I would say it would have to strengthen it." Although his original statements agreed that the man resembled Ruby, and although he confirmed this again and again, the commission reported only that Daniels, quote, testified he doesn't think the man was Ruby. When he testified before commission counsel, Daniels was not asked for objective details of the man's appearance or behavior. The commission instead solicited a subjective conclusion, which it then adopted in spite of the contrary information available. What apparently persuaded the commission to conclude that Daniels' testimony, quote, merits little credence, was that on November 24th, Vaughn telephoned Daniels to ask him if he had seen anybody walk past him on the morning of the 24th, and was told that he had not. The commission cited 2 sources, an affidavit by Daniels and Vaughn's testimony, to document that assertion. Both proved that the commission was in error. Both Vaughn and Daniels agreed that the telephone call took place on Monday, November 25th, and not on November 24th. More important, the telephone conversation related not to whether Daniels saw somebody walk past Vaughn on the morning of the 24th, but specifically to whether Daniels saw anybody enter the ramp just at the moment that a car driven by Lieutenant Rio S. Pierce was exiting from the basement. Daniels consistently stated that the man resembling Ruby did not enter the basement as the automobile was going out. I've just learned a new word. Here it is. The commission was guilty of tergiversation on this part. Tergiversation, I just looked it up. It means the act of evading giving a clear answer or diverting attention away from the truth with your speech. So now we're given another little footnote. It says, Vaughn was indignant when the Dallas Police Department cut his, quote, efficiency rating from 90 to 86. As he told the commission counsel, "I didn't feel that I should have had a cut on my efficiency under the circumstances, but the point to me they have never actually proved that Jack came in that way." After conducting his own investigation, with the diligent cooperation of the Dallas police, no doubt, he discovered that the lower rating had nothing to do with Ruby. His rating was cut, quote, for letting Tom Chabot in the basement, Vaughn said. So there's various citations being put that basically Vaughn was mad that they reduced his credit based on like his score of how good of a policeman he was based on this action, and then come to find out it was because he let a different man in the basement, which really doesn't give him any more credibility. I'm getting a whole new light on the man who was my police chief growing up. Ruby was a witness to many related events after the assassination. He was at Parkland Memorial Hospital when the president's death was announced. Now that is confirmed not only by this picture that I just showed you guys, actually right there, that's said to be the back of Police Chief Vaughn, but there is also a book. I think I have it here. Let me see. It is that red book right there. Who Was Jack Ruby? It's by a man named Seth Cantor, and he specifically said he saw and had a little conversation with Jack Ruby at Parkland Memorial Hospital. So it is very confirmed, however he got there, whatever he was doing there, that he was at Parkland that day when the president's death was announced. He was at Oswald's involuntary press conference in the police station. That is also true. When someone else asked a question of Lee Oswald during that press conference, Ruby called out the answer to it from the back. He was wearing glasses, which he didn't normally wear, and was kind of like almost pretending like he was part of the press corps there. He acted as unofficial press agent for D.A. Wade on November 22nd and 23rd. There is a reference there. I'm not going to look it up, but that's an interesting piece of data that I didn't know about. And he was seen surveying the assassination site on November 23rd. That would be by Julia Ann Mercer. Therefore, it would seem unlikely that Ruby planned to miss Oswald's transfer from the courthouse to the county jail. Fair enough. If he's tracked the whole thing every step along the way, then him being there is no surprise. On Saturday night and Sunday morning, radio and television announcements indicated that the transfer would begin just after 10 a.m. on Sunday. Yet Ruby arrived in the basement at approximately 11:20 a.m., by which time the transfer should have been completed and the basement deserted. There was evidence that Ruby did not arrive at the courthouse until just before murdering Oswald. According to Doyle Lane, a telegraph office clerk, Ruby sent a telegram from a Western Union office located some 350 feet from the top of the Main Street ramp at 11:17 a.m. He thus arrived precisely on time for the transfer, even though it should have been over an hour or more before. If you didn't catch it, the implication there is that he should have been transferred a full hour and almost 20 minutes before the murder. And so we're left to question, is that because he was trying to avoid it and not wanting to murder Oswald? Is that because they were waiting for him? Why the delay? And why does it all of a sudden line up precisely and Oswald is brought down the minute Jack Ruby enters the building and gets into place? The commission found that Ruby probably entered the basement unaided through the Main Street passageway. The only officer on guard there denied that Ruby had passed him. Ruby walked down the ramp into an area that was supposed to have been cleared. It was crowded. The transfer car was to have been in place. It was not. A corridor of police officers was to have shielded the prisoner. There was no corridor. A high sign was to have been given only if all was in order. It was given, but nothing was in order. The officers escorting Oswald should have been briefed about the threats against his life. They had not been. Yes, there had been called in threats about his life. So this is just Mark Lane was an attorney, and he is laying out a rock-solid case here of all the failures of the Dallas Police Department. Roy Vaughn was only one part of that. He was a significant part of it, but he's only one part. Ruby, armed with his revolver, pushed through the crowd, stepped out into the area where there was no car, past the place where no corridor of officers had been formed, moved up to the unalerted detectives, and fired into Oswald's abdomen. Was Ruby aided by one or more of the Dallas police, or was it only their incredible stupidity that permitted him to get in and murder their prisoner? If the transfer was officially 1 hour, 20 minutes late, did Ruby arrive on time by prearrangement or by chance? The commission favored chance. The findings of the commission cannot appease doubts, and the testimony and evidence can only help to increase them. According to Sergeant Patrick Dean of the Dallas Police, Ruby admitted that he had decided to kill Oswald on November 22nd. Ruby had a conversation with a Dallas police officer 2 nights before the murder, during which the possibility of the murder was discussed. If it is true that Ruby premeditated the killing, could he have accomplished it under the circumstances without the help of the Dallas police? He not only arrived more than 1 hour later than the scheduled event, he also penetrated a tight security net, gaining entrance into the basement without impediment. Joe Tannehill, one of the defense lawyers at Ruby's trial, reminded the jury in his concluding statement that the hour of 10 a.m. had been widely and generally known to be the time of transfer. The jury had already learned that Ruby was at the Western Union office at 11:17 a.m. Tannehill then described Ruby's murder of Oswald moments later as, quote, probably the greatest coincidence in the history of the world, end quote. Wow, that's a defense lawyer. Interesting. He finally presented his alternative explanation to the jury. This is fascinating, you guys. I now come to the point of this great, great burden. The state has got to prove there is malice in the mind of Jack Ruby. The state has the burden to prove to you that there was a conspiracy in the police department with Jack Ruby. So his defense strategy is to say, if my client is guilty, then the state of Texas bringing this case has to make the case to you that the Dallas PD was in on it, because that's the only way. Otherwise, this is the greatest coincidence in the history of the world, which is a fascinating argument. Tannehill, of course, chose to believe that there was no conspiracy between the Dallas police and his client. However, as he pointed out in his prepared remarks, before they can produce a case of malicious murder, they have got to prove that somebody tipped Jack Ruby off and set premeditation in force. And that's what a conspiracy is. Tannehill concluded by observing again that if the jurors found Ruby guilty of murder with malice, they would also be saying that there was a conspiracy between Ruby and the Dallas police. Since the Dallas police were not the defendants, the jurors were not called to pass upon that issue. They merely returned a verdict of guilty of murder with malice. That is the end of the chapter. So interesting. You can see Mark Lane's beautiful legal mind at work as he works through the case and lays out the various failures of the Dallas Police Department, the things that have to be believed together and the things that cannot be believed together. So you can either believe Roy Vaughn or not, but if you take Daniels at his word, which he kept reaffirming, then you can't believe Roy Vaughn. Very interesting. Interesting also the way that he showed that the Warren Commission had an agenda of twisting and presenting a false view of what the former officer Daniels had said in his testimony. Well, let me know what you think in the comments. I can't wait to read your comments, and I hope it's okay that I traded out the Kennedy Men today for this wonderful book. I just wanted to do justice a little bit to Rick's beautiful gift. I'm sure in the coming year we are going to dip our feet into all different chapters and quotes and arguments in many of the books. I'm just going to put up some of them here on the screen while I'm talking that he gave. I feel very fortunate. The other thing I want to mention is he didn't just send me his books. He also sent me what must be a prized collection in bubble wrap of old news clippings from San Antonio, from Chicago, from various places showing the updates of the case. What a beautiful gift. He also printed out some books for me. So just a wonderful treasure trove of Kennedy resources that I get to share with you now because of his gift. So I hope you all will also thank him in the comments and let him know what a beautiful gift it is that we all can enjoy together. So I'm very grateful. I know the readers and viewers of this channel are as well. Soon and very soon, we will have Robert Groden episodes. We will have a tour of the Lee Harvey Oswald boarding house given by Pat Hall, who's the granddaughter of the woman who ran it at the time. So lots of good things coming. I hope you'll come back and enjoy those, and we'll see you soon. Have a great day. Bye.